This is a presentation on human evolution up through today. It's the today part that gives it an interesting twist. Liberals used to berate Christians and conservatives as knuckle-dragging primitives who didn't believe in Darwin's theory of evolution. No, now it's the liberals who don't believe. They think evolution stopped. It didn't. But all of that comes later. This is the first video in a series of 3 on how we got to where we are today. In each of the videos I include a timeline running down the left margin to track where we are. There are a total of 7 timelines, each one approximately 1/10 the time period of the previous one. We start with the 4.5 billion years since the Earth was formed, and then we zoom in to the age of multicellular life, things that left fossils, zoom again to the age of mammals and birds after the dinosaurs were gone, then we zoom to the age of hominids, of which we people are the only survivors, zoom in again 35 times to the age of speech, that's modern humans, zoom again to the age of agriculture and civilization, and lastly we zoom in to the age of Western civilization. By the rough arithmetic of these timelines, evolution has speeded up about 1 million times since life began. Well, this certainly isn't true for algae, which has been the same for billions of years, or crocodiles, but it seems to be true on the leading edge of evolution if we feel ourselves to be on that leading edge. Anyhow, this video covers the period of up to 7 million years ago when we separated from our ape cousins. The present theory is that life on Earth started about 3.5 billion years ago. Throughout this presentation my dates are very approximate, but the sequence of events is more or less what scientists agree. The microorganisms that were able to support photosynthesis appeared a mere 500 million years after life itself, and they slowly started to decompose water, combining it with carbon dioxide thrown off by volcanoes and putting oxygen in the air and creating biomass. Predatory microorganisms and decomposers evolved to take advantage of the food that was now available, stored by the green organisms. And somewhere between 600 and 800 million years ago, in what's called the Cambrian explosion, multicellular life forms appeared among both plants and animals. These multicellular animals evolved more and more complicated body structures, jellyfish, then worms with a head at one end and a tail at the other, and others. Then there came an assortment of various appendages on the worms, legs, fins, tentacles, antennae, and whatnot. About 500 million years ago, land plants emerged, and at the same time there were primitive fish in the oceans. Evolution speeded up. Fish developed jaws, scales, gills over the course of the next 150 million years or so, and then some of the fins became specialized, turning into arms and legs. Reptiles had a long reign, during which birds and mammals and flowering plants got their start. Volcanic action periodically filled the atmosphere with dust and carbon dioxide, leading to 5 major extinctions, wiping out old animal forms, opened niches for new ones to develop. This speeded up evolution. Now, Darwin's theory has held up remarkably well over the 1.5 centuries since it was put forth. The newly emerging fields of biochemistry, genetics, and evolutionary psychology only seem to reinforce Darwin's insights. The essence is this: sexual reproduction guarantees that each new generation of offspring will be different from their parents. Each individual inherits precisely half its genome from each parent. The wild card in this process is random mutation. Genetic material may experience some small changes being passed from parent to child. Most of these changes are not good and result in the offspring dying or at least failing to have children. However, sometimes the mutations are advantageous. Now, each individual organism of whatever species, plant or animal, is unique. They're different in size, nutritional requirements, tolerance of drought and dangerous chemicals, and every other measurable characteristic. Animals vary in speed, strength, and intelligence. In the end, the animals that are best adapted to their environment tend to lead more offspring than those that aren't. Now, with or without extinctions, the environment is constantly changing. Traits that may be advantageous in one generation can be disadvantageous to the next. A number of factors have speeded up the process of evolution over its history. Sexual reproduction assures that the offspring will not be identical to the parents. It introduces more variety in each new generation, more variants that will be subject to natural selection. Increasing complexity of organisms gives them a more complex genome. Although the rate of mutation per gene seems to be fairly independent, the aggregate number of mutations is a function of the number of genes in an organism. Changes in the environment put selective pressure on organisms and gene pools. Environment changes more dramatically on land than in the ocean. Although the 5 great extinctions also affected marine life, the effects were far more dramatic on land. The environment in which an organism lives includes predators and prey, other organisms. The faster the others evolve, the more selective pressure there is on any given organism. Sexual selection has appeared among mammals and birds. Evolving features like the peacock's tail or blue eyes among people that have no apparent survival advantage, but are sexually attractive. And lastly, human beings in particular change our own environment. Our accelerating technology places increasing selective pressure on our genome. And the last great extinction, the most famous, but not the biggest, the dinosaurs died out. They couldn't survive the cold and dark brought on by the meteor strike in the Gulf of Mexico 65 million years ago and the resulting volcanic activity. The living dinosaurs were left without food and warmth, and their eggs couldn't wait long enough for the hard times to disappear. But other life forms had it better. Plants had seeds and spores that could survive many years of dormancy. Birds and our mammal ancestors were small and warm-blooded. They could keep warm and they didn't need much food. When the dinosaurs left the scene, mammals and birds were able to expand into their newly abandoned ecological niches. Now, mammals had mostly been small, nocturnal animals, but they quickly became larger. They specialized. Some became herbivores, some ocean dwellers, replacing the large marine dinosaurs. Bats taking over the nighttime skies as birds took over the daytime. And lastly, primates inhabited the treetops, our ancestors. As noted above, plants were not nearly as affected by the great extinctions as animals. Flowering and fruiting trees provided a great source of food. Monkeys evolved agile limbs to move around in the treetops, color vision so they could figure out which fruits were ripe and good to eat, and brains that were capable of the complex calculations required to navigate in a treetop environment without falling down, and to handle the complex social relationships that came of living in large groups. In an environment in which there was abundant food, physical size became an advantage. Bigger animals are less likely to fall victim to predators. Bigger animals can support bigger brains and were thus able to more fully exploit their environment. The great apes' body plan changed from monkeys to allow them to get bigger. Instead of running on the tops of branches, their shoulders changed to let them swing from the bottom of branches. They became equally at home on the jungle floor and in the trees, and the complexity of their social arrangements continued to evolve. The climate of Earth turned warmer and drier about 7 million years ago, shrinking the jungles. Our ancestors from the chimpanzee line left the jungles for life on the open grassland, the savanna. The common ancestors of all cat species, tiger to tabby cats, also lived between 7 and 10 million years ago. The common ancestor of dog species is only a little bit older. Basically, what I want to say is that 7 million years is a long time in evolutionary terms. Homo sapiens is the only surviving species from our ape ancestor of 7 million years ago. And that's the topic of the next video, which traces human evolution through speech and agriculture, and the following one, which goes through Western civilization. The text of this article, with hyperlinks, is on my LiveJournal site, as shown here. This is Graham Seibert signing off again from Kiev.